Hello and welcome to the viewers of this video. This is the Orange Fan here, bringing you another entry for the episode Recap and Thoughts category. This video will be dedicated to the B segment of episode 32 of The Loud House, Cheater by the Dozen. We begin this segment with Lincoln and Clyde at the McBride house where they're playing a video game. At Clyde's suggestion, they look away from the screen for a while to take a break, and they look out the front window of the McBride house, where they notice that Bobby is at the front door of the house across the street from the McBride house, and he's greeted by a girl who invites him into the house. Lincoln questions why Bobby would be at that particular house, and Clyde jumps to the conclusion that Bobby is cheating on Lori. But Lincoln points out that they should actually see what's up before they make such accusations. Later on, Bobby leaves and the girl bids him farewell. And Lincoln and Clyde confront Bobby. He does act a bit suspicious about it, and he requests that Lincoln and Clyde not tell Lori about this before he leaves. Lincoln starts to think that maybe his friend's suspicions might be accurate, and he thinks that they should tell Lori rather than what Clyde has in mind. So later on at the Loud House, Lincoln enters Lori and Lenny's room to tell Lori what he and Clyde seem to have discovered. But Lori doesn't notice Lincoln has entered her room because she's in the middle of a video chat with Bobby, and they both express excitement about their upcoming anniversary date, and they've been counting down the minutes. That's not an exaggeration, by the way. They have the exact numbers down pat. Lincoln returns to his room, and when Clyde contacts him over the walkie-talkie, Lincoln admits that he didn't tell Lori because it didn't feel like the right time. And Clyde responds that it's never the right time when someone's significant other is cheating on them. The 9 other Loud sisters have heard this from Clyde, and they barge into Lincoln's room upon hearing this. While Lincoln's angry at the intrusion, Lola demands that Lincoln tell them what he knows about these claims, and Lynn threatens to pummel him unless he talks. So the segment cuts ahead to Lincoln finishing up his reaccounting, or he's finished up reaccounting the events that he and Clyde saw. And most of the sisters seem to share Clyde's thoughts on the matter, but Lisa points out that they need to gather actual proof before they make such accusations. And the rest of the sisters concede to this because Lynn recalls when she told Lori that there wasn't any bread in the house, but Lori ended up finding a loaf of bread, and she hit Lynn on the head with the loaf of bread in retaliation for, being mistaken about whether there was bread in the house or not. And when Lincoln questions what they propose to do to find such evidence, the sisters present decide on a stakeout. So they all head back to the McBride house for the stakeout. Although Lenny takes stakeout very literally, she wants to make it a salmon out instead and make salmon. Lisa manages to set up some equipment so they can listen in on the conversation in the house that Bobby went into. She wanted to set up some equipment for video footage as well, but she ran off when she saw the shadow of what she thought was an intimidating animal. In reality, the shadow belonged to Nefertiti, the cat that the McBride family recently acquired back in the segment Baby Steps. So they're listening in on the conversation, and again, it paints Bobby in a bad light, or they fear the worst about Bobby. And while they can't actually see in the house because the curtains are blocking the window, they do see silhouettes, and it looks like Bobby and the girl are kissing. But later on, they find out that it was actually a different boy. And they figure that this other boy is the girl's boyfriend, and that Bobby is simply friends with both of them. So while happy that it looks like that Bobby isn't cheating on Lori, the sisters get angry at Lincoln for wasting their time, even though it was their idea to have the stakeout in the first place. And we cut to a later point where Lincoln and Clyde are in an arcade at the mall. And when Clyde makes the suggestion that they look away from the arcade screens, they see Bobby at a different area of the mall. And he's with a different girl. She looks like she's in high school, like Bobby and Lori are. And they wonder maybe Bobby really is cheating on Lori. But since they don't want a repeat of what happened with the stakeout, they actually bring a camera with them. And we see a couple of scenes of Lincoln and Clyde following Bobby around and taking pictures of his alleged unfaithfulness. And he's seen with interacting with several girls. Most of them seem to be high school aged. At least one or two of them seem to be older than high school age. And there's one point where Bobby's dancing with a male. And at one point, Lincoln and Clyde even assume that Bobby has crossed over species when they see him talking affectionately to a dog. And later on, they return to the rest of the sisters besides Lori, show them the pictures that they took, and the sisters fear that maybe Bobby really is being unfaithful to Lori. They head back to the Loud House to warn Lori, but she's nowhere in sight. But they decide to confront Bobby at the restaurant that he's at. And Clyde tries to pick a fight with Bobby, but Clyde, when he's trying to pull on Bobby's tie, it comes undone, and Clyde ends up fleeing into a bunch of food. So it's pretty much ruined because it's all over the floor now. And the rest of the group then see Lori actually arriving. This restaurant is where Bobby was planning to have his anniversary date with Lori. And both Bobby and Lori don't understand the accusations that are being made. And so the group present the pictures that Lincoln and Clyde took and demand an explanation. And Bobby actually is able to explain it all. He points out that all the people that they've seen him with were actually work colleagues, so from his various jobs. So some of them were co-workers, some of them were his boss or his superior, but yeah, they all associated with his many jobs. The one exception was the male he was seen dancing with, a guy named Darren. They just met each other on the bus one day, and Darren agreed to help Bobby learn how to dance. It turns out they all were trying to help Bobby so he could make his anniversary date with Lori a very memorable one. The group apologizes to Bobby and Lori for jumping to conclusions and understand that Lori's probably angry at them for almost ruining the anniversary date. Lori admits, yeah, she's angry, but she quickly calms down and admits that she understands that they meant well, they had their hearts in the right place, so she can't be too angry at them for being concerned about her well-being, and she is grateful for that. Soon enough, though, the restaurant owner, Giovanni, voiced by Carlos Alazaraki, who also voiced the mariachi band leader from Save the Date, arrives, and he complains about the ruined food that Clyde accidentally ruined when he fell into it, and he demands that they repay it somehow. So we see that while Lori and Bobby are continuing their anniversary date, Lincoln and Clyde are in the kitchen making more of the food that Clyde accidentally ruined, and that's how the segment ends. Now, I felt this segment was a good example of how misunderstandings can cause problems that weren't intended, because, well, like you saw, the Lincoln, Clyde, and most of the Loud sisters were they assumed that Bobby might have been cheating on Lori, but it ended up not being the case. And though, to be fair, some of the characters in that group, like Lincoln and Lisa in particular, pointed out that they needed to gather actual evidence before jumping to such conclusions. And although admittedly things did look like something that they really weren't, and that's a good lesson too. Things aren't always as they seem. And it's not hard to understand why they might have feared that assumption. Admittedly, Bobby's reaction to Lincoln and Clyde near the beginning of the segment didn't help matters. I understand he wanted to just keep it a surprise so that it wouldn't ruin the surprise for Lori, but he probably should have been a little more clear to Lincoln and Clyde just so that things wouldn't have become as misunderstood as they were. So I think that's another good lesson about how poor communication can cause problems for everyone. But something else I also liked was how we got to see more of Lori's more flattering qualities, because while she was understandably upset that her anniversary date with Bobby was almost ruined, she quickly calmed down and she admitted that she recognized that they all had their hearts in the right place. They really just wanted to look out for her, and she did appreciate the gesture. So it was nice to see that Lori recognized that, especially because Lori is one of the sisters that seems to have one of the worst reputations with certain parts of the fandom. And as far as things that I've noticed some people didn't like, I noticed a lot of people were not happy with how most of the Loud sisters accused Lincoln of wasting their time after the stakeout didn't bear any of the results they were expecting. And I could understand that frustration because it was the sisters' idea to have the stakeout in the first place. Not to mention they pretty much demanded Lincoln to tell them what he knew about it in a rather harsh manner. So I can see how that would bother some people. Like, yeah, I found it a little frustrating, but it didn't ruin the segment for me. It was more like a minor bump in the road for an otherwise smooth ride. So I didn't mind it too much, though I can understand why people were frustrated by that. As for why Lincoln was helping Clyde at the end, even though Clyde was the only one who messed up the food, or people were wondering why the other sisters weren't there too, I just took it as Lincoln was just being a good friend helping Clyde out. And if that really was the case, good on Lincoln for helping his friend out. So it didn't bother me too much, though I did see some people were not too happy about that ending. But it didn't bother me. So there you go. As for which segment I prefer more, I might give the edge a little more to the A segment, if only because the A segment managed to feature two characters, none of which were Lincoln as the viewpoint character, and did so with equal balance. So I might give the edge more to that one for its more outside the box approach for what's considered the norm for the show, at least so far. But this wasn't a bad segment by any means. I still enjoyed it. Like I said, even with just minor annoyances. So yeah, it's more like just slightly more the A segment, but I still enjoyed the B segment. And with that said, we've now discussed both segments of episode 32 on this channel. Take care, and until next time.